Welcome. This video is a introduction and safety video for the Chemistry 231 lab. The purpose of this video is an overall orientation to the organic chemistry lab, an overview of the safety rules, and to give you some idea about the location of the safety equipment. On top here I have a picture of the general chemistry lab, which most of you are pretty familiar with. And down on the bottom you can see there's an image of the organic chemistry lab. One of the big differences that you should notice here is that in the organic chemistry lab we don't use the small downdraft hoods. Instead we have the large fume hoods, and the reason for that is in general chemistry you're primarily working with aqueous solutions, whereas in organic chemistry we're working with a lot of volatile organic compounds. So focusing in on the organic lab, up at the top you can see there's a panorama of the organic lab that starts where this is this exit right here, and we're just scanning all the way around the lab to the other side. So that gives you an overall view of the lab. And just to give you a sense of some of the directions, you can see here is the stock room, and through there is the Gen Chem lab. We have an exit right here and an exit right here. If you like directions, this is west and this is north and this is east. So that overall gives you an idea of where the lab is at. This exit takes you to the restrooms. You'll be working two folks to a hood, okay, and the hoods that you'll be working in will be all of these circled hoods. The two hoods in the front of the room that I've circled in red, those hoods are generally used for dispensing reagents and storage of equipment and waste and things like that. There are 6 sinks in the lab that I've circled in blue here for you to get all your glassware washed up and clean. There's also an island in the center of the lab, and that's used for storage of gloves and equipment, and also for distribution of reagents and things like that. Speaking of this center island, here's a picture of the center island, which has a lot of the personal protective equipment or safety equipment that we're going to be using this semester. One of the most important things that you need to be doing in lab is you need to show up wearing appropriate pants and shoes, and yes, a shirt too. That goes without saying, I hope. As I said, we'll have gloves for you in the lab, and you need to be wearing safety glasses at all times in the lab, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And also you need to know the location of all of this safety equipment, and we're going to talk more about that as well. In this video I'm going to point out the location of the safety equipment, and then we'll briefly demonstrate the use of that equipment when we're in lab. Alright, why is safety so important? Well, it protects all of us. It protects you, it protects your lab partner, it protects us, your instructors, and it also protects the environment from harm. So I don't want you to leave this lab having hurt yourself or others or cause damage to the environment. And yeah, some bad things can happen in lab, and we'll talk about them, but they usually don't if you're careful. One of the most important things that you can do to protect yourself is to wear your PPE, and one of the most important most important items of PPE is your chemistry department approved eye protection. You should wear these safety glasses at all times when you're in the lab. You should feel naked without these safety glasses on. And it's not just what you're doing that you need to worry about yourself, worry about your eyes. It's what your neighbors are doing. So you might be being perfectly safe, but there might be some, idiot next to you that is not being as safe. And so that's why you need to always be wearing your safety glasses within your lab when you're in the lab. Some PPE that you have control over are your shoes. You need to be wearing complete shoes that cover your entire foot. Now, it's pretty obvious that sandals of all types are not the right thing to have in lab, but while these shoes are super cute, they are not protecting your feet, okay? So while they may not be, quote, open-toed shoes, they are definitely not covering your entire foot. A much better kind of shoe is a shoe like this. That's correct. That is covering your entire foot. Sneakers are a good example of this. It's a good idea maybe, to just have a pair of shoes that you keep in your car or in your backpack that you know that you're going to be able to bring to lab. Another piece of personal protective equipment that you need to have is a lab apron, like Sarah is modeling here, her lab apron. She's also detonating some nitrogen triiodide, which is why she has the long meter stick there. Or we will provide your lab aprons, and as I mentioned in class, you can purchase a chemistry department lab coat, and that is about $30. But whether it's the lab apron or the lab coat, the first thing you do when you come into lab is you should put on your lab apron and you should put on your safety glasses. All right, so let's talk about some general safety rules in the lab. Firstly, no freelancing, no freestyling. This is time for you to do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. You should not have any food in the lab, no eating, no drinking in the lab. If you have a water bottle or snack or something else like that, you need to put it inside of your backpack if you're going to bring your backpack into the lab. Do not have it on the counter or anything like that. I will take it away and I will throw it away. So no eating or drinking in the lab. No tasting any chemicals, no flames. We're using a lot of volatile, flammable organic compounds here, and so it's very, very important that you not have any of those in the lab as well. If you spill anything in general, check with a TA to make sure that you know how to clean it up correctly and safely. That is especially important if you should break a mercury thermometer. If you break a thermometer, which is your most likely source of mercury in the lab, call the instructor or the TA immediately and do not wait, do not attempt to clean it up yourself. As you can see here, and you may have some experience with this, mercury beads up and it can break apart into a million little pieces, and we have to use some specialized equipment to clean it up. And the reason we need to do that is because the liquid mercury itself is, believe it or not that toxic. One of the issues is it has a really high vapor pressure, and so inhaling the mercury vapor is one of the things that's very toxic about mercury. So at any rate, A, please don't break a thermometer, and B, if you do, let us know as soon as possible so we can get it cleaned up. Couple of other safety tips. You never ever want to heat up a closed system. You might recall from general chemistry that PV equals nRT, so if you heat up something, if you increase the temperature in a enclosed volume, the pressure is going to go up and eventually you're going to get an explosion. So do not heat closed systems. This may sound like a dumb thing. Of course, you're going to be wearing gloves, but it's always, always, always really important to wash your hands with soap and water before you leave the lab so that you don't take any traces of chemicals away from the lab with you. And it is also really important for you to think about the fact that when you're in lab, it's okay if you want to use your phone or if you want to use the computer, but you need to think about if you want to Snapchat that cool lab selfie to your friends, you need to take your gloves off. First, because anything that's on your gloves is going to end up on that screen or is going to end up on the keyboard if you're using the computer. And especially with your phone, if you have anything on the screen, where that's going to end up later is it's going to end up on your face when you make a phone call, which could cause a lot of problems. So if you're going to use your cell phone in the lab, take your gloves off to do it. Some other important notes regarding safety and lab housekeeping. Firstly, with waste disposal, we don't want to dump anything down the sink. We're going to talk about where to put broken glass, and we're going to talk about why it's important to clean up after yourself. Okay, so let's talk about waste disposal. No waste should go down the sink, especially organic wastes. Occasionally, aqueous waste is okay to go down the sink, but only if you're told that it's okay to go down the sink. One point of waste that you'll be generating is a solvent called acetone that is commonly used when cleaning glassware in the organic lab. And you'll see that next to each sink there's going to be an acetone waste bottle for that wash acetone that you're using to clean your glassware. Other wastes are going to go into appropriately labeled containers that are going to be located in one of those front hoods. In this case, it's hood 9. And you want to be very, very careful and make sure that your waste is going into the correct container. One of the issues is that putting waste into the wrong container can lead to reactions, which can happen in the waste container that you don't intend. And those reactions can then cause possibly fires, and they can also cause explosions. So it's really, really important, even though you're in a hurry, it's at the end of lab, and you want to go home, you really, really need to pay attention to where you are putting your waste at the end of lab. All of your glass waste, and this includes pipettes, vials, and any broken glass, should never, ever, ever, ever go into the trash can. It should only go into the special waste containers that are pictured on the right, and these are located next to almost every sink in the lab as well as other locations. This is important as for one thing, it's going to protect the custodial staff because they're the ones that have to empty the trash, and if there's broken glass or other glass in there, they can be cut and otherwise injured. So it's very, very important. No glass in trash cans, only in an appropriate waste container. It's also really, really important to clean up after yourself. So this is especially true next to the balances. Why is this a safety issue? If you spill a chemical next to the balance, or you leave dirty spatulas or pipettes behind, and you leave a filthy balance, why is that a problem? Well, the next person to use the balance doesn't have any way of knowing what you spilled. You know, sodium chloride and sodium cyanide are both white powders. Water and sulfuric acid are both clear liquids. They look the same, but one of those or two of those four are much more dangerous and can cause people a lot of harm. So that is why cleaning up after yourself is also a very, very good safety and essential safety practice. So the balance after you use it should look as shiny and clean and beautiful as when you got there. And this is from one lab. They had the sad panda, Henri the sad panda, and so we don't have Henri the sad panda, but we do have Rudy the cat, and so he will be keeping an eye on you to make sure that you are cleaning up after yourself when you use the balances. One of the other issues with not cleaning the balance is that when you leave chemicals and other things on the balance, it causes the balance to corrode and break down, and these are expensive precision instruments. So keep it clean. So what kind of stuff can happen in lab that's not so great? Well, cuts and burns and chemical burns, and I've certainly had my share of all of those. You can also be exposed to chemicals if you're not careful, like acids and bases, and or even gases like HCl and carbon monoxide. And some solids are really corrosive and careful. But if you're wearing your personal protective equipment and you're being careful, it should not be a problem. Some less common, thank goodness, incidents that can happen in lab are things like fires, major chemical spills, serious injuries, and explosions. And I've seen all of these. An explosion was because somebody had mixed waste in a container that they shouldn't have mixed. Fires, I set myself on fire in lab. Don't you do that. But these are less common things, thank goodness. Just to give you a sense of some of the havoc that a spill or an accident can reach in lab, this is a lab in Texas Tech. After a solvent fire, they had the solvent a little too close to a hot plate. So because we want to avoid anything like this happen, we need to be very focused on safety in lab, And also, I want to show you the location of some of the safety equipment, and we'll demonstrate this during lab. So there is a fire extinguisher in the lab, and that is located right here next to hood 11. So that's where you will find it, in between the exit and hood 11. We also have a safety shower, and I'll demonstrate the use of this. I won't take a shower, I'll just demonstrate the use of this when we're in lab. And that safety shower is also next to hood 11 right here, so right in that location. Now, there's the shower that's up here, and there's also an eye wash here, that is if you get anything in your eyes. And before you think, wow, hood 11 gets everything, well, there are sinks, as I pointed out earlier, in different locations around the lab, and each one of those sinks has a sprayer that can also be used as an eye wash or to rinse small amounts of chemicals that you might get on your skin while you're in the lab. Finally, I want to point out the location of the first aid kit, which has everything we might need to deal with minor injuries like cuts and scrapes and burns. And that is not located next to hood 11, as you can see here. It's located near the prep room / stock room, and that means it's bolted to the wall. So if you want to find the first aid kit, it is going to be right there. Hopefully you won't need it this semester. And finally, just a quick reminder that if you have any questions at all about safety when you're in the lab, please do not hesitate to ask.